You're listening to the Choice FM, where it doesn't matter where you come from, but where we can go together. The show will start in a moment. Hello and welcome to the Choice FM podcast for January 20th, 2018. I'm FD Gifford and I will be the host of the show for the next 20 or so minutes. If you are new to the show, I hope this show will soon become a favorite. And if you get value from our regular broadcast, please hit the subscribe button so you will be notified of our next episode. Got a lot to cover today, so I will kick off the show. I call this the weekly wrap-up on Healthcare Show. And today I would like to share with you and take a few of the top headlines in healthcare or in small business sector from the news. And this week, the MSN or mainstream media is pushing their flu agenda hard. The question is why? All of the top mainstream media outlets are pushing the, quote, deadly flu outbreak story this week. Some call this fear porn news, designed to trigger the mass U.S. population to line up for free vaccinations under the protection of Big Pharma, as approved from our centralized government bureaucrats. Here are a few examples of this week's hysteria on the flu. Headline number 1, 5 things you should know about this year's very bad flu, ChicagoTribune.com or on Time.com. Here is why the flu is especially bad this year, end quote. Or this one from Gizmodo.com, just get the damn flu shot, end quote. Even the National Geographic is pushing this narrative with their headline, what makes this flu season so bad? Suggesting that, quote, a dangerous strain paired with less effective vaccines has created a dangerous recipe for illness. Or how about this one titled, what you need to know about this season's brutal flu, over at PBS NewsHour site. Everyone is pitching in to fight the flu. I even republished an article from the Kaiser Health News on, quote, defending against this season's deadly flu, 5 things you need to know now. You can check that out yourself at ywnhmedia.com, MSN Defense Inevitable Flu. There's something sad and pathetic about this misinformation message during an era of fake news. For years, the credibility of so many institutions has been declining. Recently, the mainstream media or MSN press is falling fastest. And this week's healthcare news wrap-up is a good example of that situation. But first, let's define what the flu illness is or isn't. As defined by the CDC, quote, influenza or flu is a contagious respiratory illness caused by influenza viruses. It can cause mild to severe illness. Serious outcomes of the flu infection can result in hospitalization or death. Some people, such as older people, young children, and people with certain health conditions, I emphasize that, certain health conditions, are at high risk of serious flu complications, end quote. The key element to that definition is that last line, people with certain health conditions. Let's shine some light on those health conditions. Yes, it is true that certain people are found to have higher risk for developing flu-related complications. Here, the CDC is important to that list are children younger than 5, but especially children younger than 2.5 years old, adults 65 and age older, pregnant women, or women up to the last 2 weeks of postpartum, residents of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities, and also American Indians and Alaska Natives, who they list says seem to have a higher risk of flu complications. People who have medical conditions are also included, such as asthma or neurological or neurodevelopmental conditions, including disorders of the brain, spinal cord, peripheral nerve, muscle, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, seizures, stroke, intellectual disabilities, yada, yada, yada. How about chronic lung disease, such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, or cystic fibrosis? And heart disease, a congenital heart disease, congestive heart failure, or coronary artery disease. Blood disorders, such as sickle cell, endocrine disorders, such as diabetes, kidney disorders, liver disorders, weakened immune system or to disease or medication, such as people with HIV or cancer or other chronic steroid drugs. People younger than 19 years of age who are receiving long-term aspirin therapy, they list. People with extreme obesity, the body index, the BMI of 40 or more. In simple language, or in my opinion, this tells me that individuals with a compromised immune system could have a higher risk of health complications if another illness, influenza, is added on top of their already existing unhealthy condition. Given the alarming fact that too many Americans have heart disease, basically everyone who is diabetic, or have a weakened immune system due to a disease or are on a medication, notice that you get a weakened immune system if you're on medications, or you're just extremely obese. Now, continuing back to the flu fear porn headlines, did you see the one over at Fortune? How many people die from flu and other questions, end quote. Well, all this information about risk of complications and even death is an interesting question. You may also want to know how many die or are injured from getting the flu vaccine, which is often cited as a critical method of prevention of this, quote, brutal flu season, end quote. Now, that's a topic the MSN does not promote, given the huge economic pressure big pharma can use through advertising expenditures on the MSN. Fortunately for us, while it does take some digging, there is a way to answer this question, both in terms of death and generalized risk, based on the reported settlements processed over at the Department of Justice. Why does the DOJ report vaccine settlements? Simple. That's where our government decided to handle cases against their cronies over at Big Pharma. Both wanted it that way, I guess. Some call it the Vax Court. And by the way, I have a link of that in the show notes to the wiki, just if you wanted to have a more detailed definition of the Vax Court. Personally, I found this information over at the vaccineimpact.com page via Health Impact News. This site makes it their mission to follow and publish the quarterly adjudicated settlements of the Vax Court. The Health Impact News published an article titled, quote, "Flu shots remain most dangerous vaccine based on injuries and death compensated by a government." Now, this article provided 2015 data, and I thought to look at a more current data would be valuable, and I found by following the Advisory Commission on Childhood Vaccines link, and the data was reported in the December 2017 Commission meeting. I found on page 5 something very interesting in the report. This data is since the Commission's start in October of 1988 through November of 2017. And here are some of the facts they don't share on Fox and Friends or other MSN news outlets. On a total of 18,823 filed claims, they call them petitions, 21% of all claims were on the flu vaccine. And of the 3,961 flu claims, 58% of these were compensated based on the merits of their injury or death. It is important to note that only 3% of the filed claims were death claims. However, 131 death claims were 11% of all death claims filed on all vaccines. Now, this data seems to support that the Impact News article headline, "Flu shot remains most dangerous vaccine, ... justifies it. Now, not being satisfied, while digging a bit deeper into this data, I found and learned something about the data that must be noted. The vaccine data was only added to the Commission's report as of July 2005. I learned this in the footnote found on page 3 of the September 2017 meeting report. Now, using the September's report data, I found the following. The data from cumulative data from 1/1/2006 through 12/31/2015, there were 2,197 flu petitions, claims, remember, filed, and 1,898, or 86%, were found to be compensable, while only 14% were dismissed. This number compared to the total of all vaccines is also interesting. During this period, there were 4,528 total petitions filed at the Vax Court, and 2,962, or only 65%, were compensable, with the flu vaccine petitions leading the list at 49% of all petitions and 64% of all compensable petitions during this period. Now moving on with more headlines. From the week's Great Flu Scare of 2018, here's a doozy from the New York Times. Yes, lots of people are getting flu symptoms. No, this season isn't so unusual. Here's why. Sharing a bit more from the article by Don G. McNeil Jr., he suggests, quote, at the moment of the 2017-2018 flu season is considered moderately severe. He uses the term moderately severe based on his earlier report, where, quote, the public health officials, I assume he means Dr. Daniel Juridan, director of Influenza Division at the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. The doctor reported earlier this month that, quote, the flu is now widespread across the country, and the peak of transmission probably occurred during Christmas to New Year's holiday week, just as many people were crowded into planes, buses, and cars in a large family gatherings, end quote. And continuing on with, quote, about 80% of cases are of the H3N2 strain, which caused many hospitalizations and deaths this year in Australia, where winter comes in July and August. Continuing on with his quote, the H3N2 is a bad virus, Dr. Juridan said. We hate the H3N2. Adding, compared to the H1N1, the other seasonal type A strain, and to the B strains that are usually arrive late in the season, the H3N2 tends to kill more of the very young and very old. Mostly the British media was putting out, quote, warnings about the, quote unquote, killer Aussie flu as far back as September. For your information, the CDC does attempt to collect flu data, to determine the strain and posts it on their weekly index page, and the link is in the show notes at the cdc.gov Flu Weekly Index. He goes on to report on the severity of this year's season. What you need to know is this, quote, the H3N2 is the most dangerous of the 4 seasonal flu strains, but it is not new or nor uniquely lethal, end quote. With, as of January 7th, about 78% of all samples genetically sequenced to have the H3N2, according to the CDC. Quote, it is worth getting the flu shot anyway. Is it worth getting the flu shot anyway, the doctor goes on? Experts say yes, because when the flu shot does not prevent you from catching the flu, it may save you from dying of it, end quote. Say what? The vaccine will not prevent you from getting the flu, but will keep you from dying from the flu? I'm not buying that at all. Clearly, this year's vaccine is only partially effective because it is only partially includes the H3N2 strain. Therefore, even if you get the vaccine, you will get sick, but I guess you won't die. Clearly, lots of people get sick with the flu each winter, and as the temperature gets colder and the air drier, promoting longer survival of the germs and increased exposure to other people in closed environments. Got it? But does the flu really kill you? How many Americans die from the flu each year? Well, per the CDC here, I found some information on flu deaths. The number of seasonal influenza-associated, this is seasonal flu-related, deaths vary from year to year because flu seasons often fluctuate in length and severity. Therefore, a single estimate cannot be used to summarize influenza-associated deaths. Instead, a range of estimated deaths is a better way to represent the variability and unpredictability of the flu. Looking back at the prior year's data, they reported on December 9th, 2016, the CDC posted estimates of the seasonal flu deaths from more recent seasons in the United States. The CDC estimates that from 2010 and 2011 to 2013-2014, influenza-associated deaths in the United States ranged from as low as 12,000 during the 11 to 12 season to a high of 56,000 during the 12 to 13 season. Death certificates and weekly influenza virus surveillance information was used to estimate how many flu-related deaths occurred among people whose underlying cause of death on their death certificate included, get this, respiratory or circulatory causes. The cause of death was not the flu. It was respiratory or circulatory. Going on, the CDC says, during the 2015-2016 season, influenza A, that's the H3N2 virus, circulated early in the season, but influenza A H1N1 viruses predominated overall. The season was notable because influenza activity peaked in mid-March of 2016, one of the later peaks on record. In the United States, influenza activity mostly peaks between December and February. We're almost there, people. The overall burden of influenza was substantial, with an estimated 25 million influenza illnesses, 11 million influenza-associated medical visits, 310,000 influenza-related hospitalizations, and yes, 12,000 P&I deaths. What are P&I? Those are pneumonia and influenza deaths, according to their table. Noted past comparative data suggests the total number of influenza-associated RNC, remember, respiratory and circulatory causes, may be between 2 and 4 times greater than estimated using the P&I deaths. Overall, the burden for last year, estimates of last year, are lower than the estimated burden for the 3 previous seasons, but are near the middle range for the previous 5 seasons. Again, let's go back to the headlines in this fear flu porn season. Over at Harvard, there's one titled, The 10 Flu Myth Facts. Let's touch on those quickly. Myth 1, you can catch the flu from the vaccine. Myth 2, healthy people don't need to be vaccinated. Myth 3, getting the flu vaccination is all you need to do to protect yourself from the flu. Myth 4, the flu is just a bad cold. Myth number 5, you can't spread the flu if you're feeling well. Number 6, you don't need to get the flu shot every year. Myth number 7, you can catch the flu from going out in the cold without a coat, with wet hair, or sitting by a drafty window. By the way, I talked about this in an previous episode on The Choice, and the link is in the show notes if you're interested in learning about the cold outside. Myth number 8, feed a cold, starve a fever. Myth number 9, chicken soup will speed your recovery from the flu. Tell that to my mother. God rest her soul. And finally, myth number 10, if you have a high fever with the flu that lasts more than a day or 2, antibiotics are necessary. I suggest if you want to learn more about these myths about the flu, you can go to the show notes for this podcast for the link to the Harvard page. They also have a page titled How to Prevent Infections I used to research this topic, and as expected, their list did include getting vaccinations, but said nothing about maintaining a healthy immune system, your natural defense system, to the inevitable germ exposure. Speaking of your immune system, would it be wise to boost your immune defense from the flu? Well, consider the following train of thought by Dr. Nina Radcliffe, found in the Washington Times article titled, During this brutal flu season and cold season, boost your immune system, end quote. It's a brutal flu and cold season. With it comes a barrage of information offering support for help and relief. And as you plan precautionary measures to help take care, you may be left wondering, what can you do, end quote. Now, she goes on to say, your immune system bands together to fight foreign invaders, bacteria, viruses, parasites, and even cancerous cells. Understanding and following good health guidelines are essential to keeping this quote-unquote army strong and healthy. There are scientifically proven measures that you can take to boost your immune system. On this topic, a Harvard Medical School released findings underscoring a key foundational understanding that is important for each of us to know. Quote, the immune system is precisely that, a system, not a single entity. To function well, it requires balance and harmony. This includes a healthy diet, hydration, exercise regularly, adequate sleep, and managing or minimizing stress, as well as other healthy choices to avoid infection, like washing your hands and, of course, getting the flu vaccination. In addition, optimal health strategies include not smoking, seeking your physician's care and wisdom when needed, and if you drink alcohol, drink only in moderation, end quote. As the doctor reports, what you need to know about boosting your immune system, Army, food fuels your body. The foods you consume provide your immune system with the vitamins, nutrients, minerals, the building blocks it needs to function at its best. Complex, there are many micronutrients that play critical roles in your immune system. Consuming a well-balanced diet rich in fruits, vegetables, legumes, lean meats, fish provides the right ingredients to keep your immune system and your body in tip-top shape. What you need to know, and I personally practice, starts with the flu season each year. It is supported by quality research found at Harvard Medical School and others. The Harvard Medical School reviewed research that addresses healthy food intake as a real defensive army for all disease. As the doctor stated, like any fighting force, the immune system army marches on its stomach. Healthy immune system warriors need good, regular nourishment. Therefore, my healthy living practice starts with a lean start to your nutrition program, which holistically focuses on the sound design well-care plan over treatment or healthcare plans. I personally call it the Core 4 Plus well-care plan. And as a certified health coach, I know that this must include healthy eating, hydration, exercise, sleep, and avoidance of toxic exposures to do more, in my opinion, than any other practice you might have. It has worked for me for many years. Flu is a minor event in my life and has been for years, but does take more effort and responsibility to implement and maintain. No silver bullets, no magic pills or shot. Not based on luck or chance encounter with any hard surfaces or a sneeze. To learn more about research supporting my thoughts, visit an abstract at cambridge.org, British journal that talked about having more and more fruits and vegetables. In fact, in a double-blinded test, did it reduce. This British journal article scientifically confirms that concentrated diets of fruits and vegetables reduce cold symptoms. Or would like to get it, it can be found in the show notes, and it's posted at YWNH Media. And one more final but surprising note on the subject of flu and your immune system. There are very interesting data can be found about neutrophils. Don't worry, I didn't know what they were either, but per the wiki, they basically, here's what I found. Neutrophils are key to your healthy immune system, and besides keeping your body strong by maintaining a healthy lifestyle, I found right on the NIH, this is the National Institute of Health website, while researching the flu vaccine, the link is in the notes, here's the headline you need to know. The question was, does influenza alter the ability of neutrophils, your immune system warriors, to defend against bacteria? And here's the quotation. Infection in influenza viruses may not always weaken white blood cells, known as neutrophils, a phenomena that could result in a more secondary bacteria infection. In fact, some strains of influenza virus can enhance the neutrophil response, according to a new study published January 3rd in Emsphere in collaboration with NIH. One group of researchers specialized in studying neutrophils, white blood cells that make up the body's primary defense against potentially harmful bacteria, such as Staphylococcus aureus, a leading cause of secondary bacteria infections. Interactions between bacteria and neutrophils are well documented in science journals, but less is known about how neutrophils interact with viruses. Two common but conflicting research story observations were found by the study. People with influenza A virus lung infections seemingly have more secondary bacterial infections, and during influenza A bacterial virus infections, people's lungs can be enriched with neutrophils. In this study, scientists exposed human neutrophils to seasonal and pandemic strains of H1N1 influenza virus in a laboratory model designed to mimic host pathogen interactions during infection. Surprising exposure to seasonal, but not pandemic, H1N1 influenza enhanced neutrophil function, including its ability to kill Staphylococcus aureus. You know, that antibiotic-resistant bacteria we are terrified of getting? The researchers also identified changes in neutrophil gene expression in response to the virus. So getting the flu may also be boosting your abilities to protect yourself against other bacteria. Well, that's a wrap. Sure hope you enjoyed the research that I found. I've run a little long. I'm going to post this up. I hope you enjoy this show. If you do, give it a like, give it a share. Have a great week. This show was recorded on the beautiful Carolina coast. All rights are reserved at ywhnmedia.com.